Waiting.
He doesn't
He doesn't
have,
have
he's just showing
video.
up as the camera.
All right, he doesn't have audio.
Bill, are you muted? Maybe?
Oh, there he is.
We should
Can
hear
you hear
him
us,
now.
Bill?
Can you hear us, Bill?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll come to order. First up is the agenda. We have one request for an addition and one request for deletions.
All right, I move to accept the agenda as presented, except for the addition of a discussion for the DA's office on leasing the copier as agenda item 2A and removing the executive session and 9B.
Your second,
I second the motion.
any further discussion or additions? We're ready to vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And Bill?
Aye.
Okay, so unanimous. Next up is public comment. Is there anyone here to speak to any items? And I'm not seeing anyone on Zoom, is that correct?
That's right.
So we'll move on to the next item is the meeting minutes. We have the minutes of the February 7th regular meeting before us.
I move to approve the minutes of the February 7th, 2023 Commissioners' regular meeting as presented.
Second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Ready to vote? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So we're unanimous. And then, John, you said the DA was item 2A.
Yes.
Okay, so that's up now. Is the DA here? No. So we'll move on. Wait,
Table that.
yeah, wait till he shows up. Well, okay. ARP discussion, item A, John, you have a discussion, or a presentation for us? Or
For conversation, how's Excuse me. Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
It's been a couple of meetings since I was live.
Yeah.
I'll go over a couple of quick items and then I'll talk about an idea that we have, but the Swans Island was awarded the Maine Connectivity Fund, so your matching contribution can be worked with them, and we're working with Michael on that.
And
It's
that's,
already done.
Done, all done. Okay.
okay, that's been expended.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was in the amount of 173,250.
Yes.
Go ahead. Okay. Another one is Orland has been actually working directly with Consolidated, or I should say they put out a little RFP, but they ended up talking to Consolidated on a broadband expansion project. Looks like a good project. They're still giving us some details on it. But their request maybe in around $200,000, which is tracks with the spreadsheet, the tracking sheet. That's still more details and more conversation to have on that. So waiting, it'll be another meeting or so before they can present that. Well, our understanding is the next Maine Connectivity Authority grant round will be late spring, early summerish timeframe. So wait to hear that as well, but that's why there's not a time crunch on that right now. Another one that came to us within the last weekend, it was Eagle Island. I should say that we worked with them last year. And they worked with a company called Axiom. So to get there is going to be a microwave solution, which I believe is already set up. This one would be to actually take it from the microwave and I'll sync it down Main Street with fiber and try to hit every, there's not a lot of homes, put it that way, but hit homes with that. So that again, still waiting on detail around it. They gave me an initial number. I'm always cautious because it had no detail. So it was around 50,000, but I just don't know that that's.
Is this one that's going to be contingent on them getting other funding?
That may or may not. Very little detail on that so far.
And that's not on the spreadsheet.
No.
No, I
Because we
think
don't
that
have
would be,
anything yet.
that would be
Paul?
on UTF.
Bill?
I'm just curious, gentlemen, if you had your druthers and we were gonna fund that, we'll say at the tune of what could be up to 100,000, we'll just say hypothetically. Would you prefer to take that from ARPA? Or would you prefer to take that from the TIF? Eagle Island's in an unorganized territory, they qualified for the TIF benefits. So I'm just curious, where would you rather fund that from if you had the option?
I would say I'd want it out of the TIF if we can, because I feel like we struggle to find uses for the TIF funds. So I'd rather do that personally, because it seems like you don't have any trouble finding money for the ARPA funds.
And the TIF needs to be expended in the UT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I'd like to charge Miller then with researching that to see if the project that is being proposed can be paid for with TIF money instead of the ARPA.
Okay, yep.
Michael.
You're looking at an amount though, John, possibly closer to 50,000, or do you think it could go as high as?
That was they threw that at me and I never trusted.
Okay,
That's my honest answer.
okay,
Yeah, because there was no detail behind that number, just, hey, here's the number.
okay.
So,
Go ahead.
okay. And then just to give you an update on the Blue Hill Peninsula project, that was the one the state was awarded NTIA money. And so that has talked to a couple of towns the other day and consolidated, and they actually have started that project. So that was a long time to kind of get started, but it has been started. So I don't know if you remember right, but that's 7 towns down in the Blue Hill Peninsula area.
Yeah,
So that'll take care of that whole area when that's done. And that's supposed to be done, I'll say mid-year.
but that's no funds in perfect.
Nope, it wasn't.
that's not reflected here
It
anyway.
is not, but it was part of, if you remember the
Yeah.
Yeah,
RBAC, those 2 towns, and so
Yeah.
that is getting built out.
Yeah.
Okay? Any questions on those? Oh,
Plus, no,
Commissioner.
So just to clarify, the Blue Hill Peninsula project, you're not looking for,
No funding, no.
okay.
okay, and then there's still, you've touched on Orland. Touch. Okay, all the others have been accounted for. Okay, that's what I just wanted.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay,
Shift back. So the other idea that we have, obviously, we're trying these one by one, if you will, town by town, a little bit, a couple of towns, is what we could look at, just kind of finalizing this and putting out one, I'll say large, but one countywide RFP, in which case we would identify, and this would be working with MCA, because we need some coordination with them, where we would identify all the remaining, they call them rooftops of least served, less than 20 areas, don't have broadband. And put that into one RFP for the area with that map and say, okay, which providers, put it up the service providers and say which providers are interested in serving these rooftops. And result with, again, speculating, but would be, you'd have 2, 3, potentially maybe 4 providers, right, that would solve it. It's not one that's going to come in and say, okay, I'll do it, as we've seen with this project. CCIs in areas, different providers are in different areas that would have the advantage potentially of saying, hey, I'm already there, I've got network, I can expand my network in some ways. And the concept behind that, the reason we're thinking, even looking at it is, the landscape has changed since we started this project. The money has changed since we started this project, and now we have a better understanding how Maine Connectivity Authority wants to work with us, and how the federal funding, and the next one is called BEAD, there's going to be $200 some odd million coming from that as well, how that's going to be applied, and it has to be very specific rules around that, harsher than our rules. I'll put it that way, harsher than what we're currently working with. Very specific about what they can serve, and it's what they consider, Maine considers at least serve, but less than what they call 25/3. And that's really what we've been kind of working with. Our rules would allow that to you can cover a little bit different, a little bit more bandwidth areas, if you will. But these are very specific. So the concept is, okay, well, let's work with MCA and the commissioners and say, here's all the rooftops of everything that's not served today, right? What it means for the commissioners, right? So we would have to agree on a cost to do the RFP, but you would have this ARP funding, depending on what's left at this point, and you would commit that and saying, okay, if this moves forward, we're committing to X amount as a grant match, so to speak, for this project. And they would be
Or for this group of
for
projects.
this group, or yeah, I was gonna say this, good catch, for this group of projects. And part of that's why I say, really kind of, we need MCA for two reasons. One is they're the keeper of, okay, what's unserved, right? What do they consider that this money can be spent on? And two, is it looked at as, 12 individual projects? Can it be looked at as a group from a grant perspective, right? How does a grant program gonna work? And we don't know those answers just yet until the next BEAD money, I'll say, comes into play, and that's gonna be, later this year or early next year.
So are we looking, okay, so would this be, is this conceivable that this is done with what's left in our money that we have?
Correct. Yes.
So that is conceivable.
Right, we're not asking for that today, but you would say, okay, hey, there's whatever the dollar amount is you're comfortable with, I'll make it up, there's 4 million left, maybe you say 3.5, whatever that number is, and saying, okay, we're now committing that ARP to this plan. And when the time comes, so it has to be spent by 2026, 25, 26. Yeah, so that'll all fall into place with the time frame as well.
And
So here's, the idea of the town by town, okay, there's still certainly some towns that are unserved as a group, right? Southwest Hillsborough, some of the areas that are like, okay, really bad. But there's a lot of towns that have pieces. And when they're not being looked at as, okay, I've got a dozen over here, or I've got 100 over here, you know what I mean? You start to end up with, you guys have put a lot of effort into this project. In the end, you kind of walk away, and there's still people that's not served. And that there's not that, so this is really what we're doing is, trying to work with the service provider community, work with MCA, commissioners that are, have committed to this. How do we get this solved for, near, I'll say 100%, never use 100%, but near 100% of all these towns that are, down these side roads or just, expansions of projects that need to happen. So that's the proposed idea that we have.
So John, when we first all started talking about it, we were talking about mapping and all of
Yeah.
that. So right now, how do you, how is it determined where the underserved really is?
Yes.
To a certain degree, for me to commit to a dollar amount, I want to know, for whatever, $3 million, $4 million, how many am I serving?
Yes.
How many am I fixing?
That, and we are working on that, and here's the answer to that. So the mapping we did originally was based on service provider data that we had and public available data. We will put that together. Since then, again, it's part of what's changed. The FCC has mandated new service provider data and new maps, right? And so we do have access to that data now. So unfortunately, it's not public, so we have to be careful how we share it. But we will have numbers for the commissioners that say, okay, it is 5,000 households, right? That we're going to try to, that's what's going to be part of this project. So yes, we will have those numbers. That's why we're going to work with MCA as well, because we want to make sure that our mapping matches their mapping, so that we agree on the numbers.
And the reason to work with MCA is because they're the keeper of that
Of the
data.
big of the money. Yeah.
Of the
So it's a
money
matching.
in the
map.
data.
In the data. Yeah. Well, yes. And it's the FCC data, and everybody has access to that. Sometimes it's the interpretation, because it's not always accurate. And that's part of this whole challenge for us that's going on nationwide right now. Maine put in like 120,000 location challenges in the last, in January. So.
Commissioner Clark?
It seems to me like we have really two options with regards to determining who does have decent service and who doesn't. And John is proposing that we survey the entire county and then at some point we'll know who is lesser served than they need to be. And at that point, we can focus on them. And I see the downside of that to me. First of all, two things. First of all, we're going to be talking to towns who have known now for 2 years that we're sitting here wanting to help you if you want our help, and they've never contacted us, they've never been involved, they're not interested. Second of all, if we designate $4 million for the balance of this project, and this study determines there are $8 million in need, we're going to be stuck with a pick and choose over which towns we're going to serve and which ones we're going to leave behind. I think that could be a difficult situation. I would like to take the opposite stance that we have been taking all along, and that is let everybody know that we're here. We have this service. If you want some help with your internet connection and service for your community, get involved, tell us, and we'll work with you on that. Because if you're not interested, we're going to devote our time to those people who are. So I'd like to, if John is done with this presentation, I'd like for us to consider taking this under advisement, tabling his request for today, thinking about this more before we make a decision on how to proceed.
And thank you, Commissioner Clark. And yes, I didn't want to come across like I was looking for a move forward today, for sure. And one other clarification, when you said that the commissioners would may have to choose, I would push that actually back to MCA and their grant process.
Yeah.
Right, we're saying that we will provide a grant match, but the process, they have the $8 million, if you will, if that's what it's going to cost, right? They have the larger bucket of money, and we're just saying, okay, from a Hancock County Commissioner's perspective, we believe in this. Here's a process that we'll follow, but it's up to you guys to decide the total amount and the locations.
Well, and I take this as to be somewhat the opposite of what Commissioner Clark outlined, because we're sort of stepping back from that picking and choosing, right? Isn't that what?
We've opened it up, they've come to us, but in most cases, some have been specifically, we didn't go for grant. But the other ones, you put money with the stipulation that they get the grant, and that's what this is as well. This is a stipulation that MCA grant goes through. And there's a project for them to actually, for you guys to spend money on.
So the idea is that would we be, so in the end, we would at some point after you do like the more formal presentation of our households and all of that, whatever dollar amount we decide, if we decided to go for it, let's say it's $2 million, then the idea is that MCA would is it an equal match?
No, yours would be a percentage there. Theirs is very large, much higher.
Much higher.
Yes.
Yes, where we would step in is probably on the local side of that match.
That is correct, yeah. They've in the past, what they've done is, the last grant round is all I can really go by, is they said it's, I'll call it $700 per household. Right, that's what they looked for a match in the grant. Now that comes from a different way, right? So this is not just what can the, commissioners add to this grant. It's also what can the providers add to this grant, right? This is a group effort. This isn't one pot of money is going to solve this. And that's part of the challenge. Is it just not enough? Even with the 230-ish million coming next year, it's just not enough to solve everything. So where else could, that money come from? We look at the providers in a very serious way and say, okay, how are you stepping up to this? Because they also have to provide, because in the end, it's their network.
Yeah.
So there's an advantage, right? There's advantage to them. So what are they willing to also match? So.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking in such generality.
Yeah.
I think this makes sense as a tack. It's not, we're not committing any funds
Yeah.
till there's a major commitment somewhere else.
Sure.
So I'm not, yeah, And you're not asking us to make a decision yet, because we really don't have everything we need to make a
If
decision.
we do not.
Yeah. Okay,
But I wanted to share the idea to see if that was, a plausible idea, and we can, currently, we still have, again, this is your money you're paying us with. And so I want to make sure I'm expending that appropriately, and we can spend some of this, some time on this as well.
yeah, and that fits within what we've done already.
Incorrect.
So I personally,
Just a quick question, John. When do you anticipate you'd be able to have all that information? I mean, is this something within the next year, or are we
Oh,
talking?
no, it would be, I'd say within the 2 months, I'd like to do it, have some good numbers working with MCA. That one of the challenges that we have, when we talk about mapping, is it's forever changing. And there's a new set of maps from the FCC coming out in June. But that doesn't stop us from knowing what we have today and saying, okay, it's not going to change that much. Right? It's really not for Maine. It's not going to change that much. For other areas, it could.
so this is 3 to 6 months.
Well, for us to give you an idea of what it is, I would say the next 2 months for the data that we have to give you an idea. Okay, here's what it's going to cost to do this project. If you wanted us to help you with it. And then an estimate of, okay, it's a rooftop thing. What do we see for a cost? We really don't know until you put the RFP out. People come back and say, here's what it's going to cost. So, yeah, I'd say within the next couple of months, I can present to the commissioners.
Commissioner Clark, did you have anything
He had a motion.
to? Yeah, I don't, well, he hasn't made it, so.
Oh, I didn't make that motion. I just
Just
Yeah.
wanted-
No, I don't-
make it, yes.
Nobody's anticipating any action today, right? Is Bill and John, is that,
Yeah, there's just the action, just to have.
okay, anything else to add?
I'll move to accept and file the broadband report as presented. But to table any action on the RFP.
I second the motion.
Okay, moved and seconded, any discussion or questions, anything to add,
I
John?
think we're good. Thank you.
Okay, we've been set, okay, ready to vote, all in favor? Aye,
I,
so unanimous. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And certainly, as the Commissioner Clark's pointed, other towns come along and are ready, and we're gonna keep doing what we're doing, so.
I got one more motion to accept and file the allocation and spending reports as presented.
Your second,
I'll second the motion. We're going to discuss those. That has nothing to do with broadband, John. I mean, JD, John.
Let's do it. Okay, gotcha.
okay, so you're making that,
Yeah.
moved and seconded, and then we're gonna
Then we'll
discuss.
discuss it.
Okay. Great, go ahead. No,
This isn't. Michael, isn't this you?
So basically, we updated the changes based on the last meeting discussion. So you have kind of in front of you now, the plan, which before was referred to as a budget. And then we also took what we had previously worked with Kitty on for a layout of a framework of the expenses that have been paid and kind of plug those into those two overall categories. Now, at the time, there was discussion last meeting about bringing that back. You could start to categorize and put those into categories. I don't know if you're ready at this point to do that. We knew obviously that you had to have this presentation from John just a minute ago, but it was my understanding that those two wouldn't necessarily have to be directly related. So it really, and of course, we didn't know that, Commissioner Clark wouldn't be able to be here in person at the time when we put it on the agenda either. So it really gets back to when you want to have that discussion about breaking it down into overall categories and assigning some type of format to that ARPA process and plan.
And I really think, Paul, that's the key to this, is that what we have in front of us today really is just a summary of what we've done to the point, to this point, but it falls short of what do we want to do with the full 8.6 million that we've been given. And I think that really needs an in-depth discussion as to what those categories are going to be, what areas we're going to address. I mean, we haven't talked about anything yet on housing, and I think that's something that John would like
So
to.
as I understand this, we have 7.2 that has not been designated. Okay,
Yeah, but I mean, that's not quite correct, because we have in fact designated that 480,000 for cruises. That's not reflected here, even though we haven't, I mean, that motion was made to allow the sheriff to buy 8 cars and to pay for it out of ARPA funds. And that really should be added to the total, so that we're down under the 7 million.
That's the
Is
400, the money is allocated for the cruisers.
Yeah.
It is allocated.
yeah,
It might be open, but it's still allocated. It's
Yeah.
open that,
it's,
so that's 7.1.
The 480,000 is unexpended,
yeah,
but it's part of the
Is that
project.
part of the 569, Monica?
Yes.
yes, that's what's left of it.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Okay,
So, and the broadband is reflected in totality, right?
On what has been spent.
But not, in the beginning, we had designated,
Designated
half.
So.
That's right.
yeah, so, and we've expended,
We've really expended only about 751,000
yeah,
out of it.
so we really need to back that out at this point, because we've,
Yeah.
That was part of the planned discussion for today, was
yeah,
to hear John and to hear what he was expecting to put forward for his continuing projects.
yeah, so my feeling is, sitting here now, knowing that it's gonna change, that half or the balance of that half needs to be reflected here.
Mhm.
Because we don't know what it is yet. So if we do that, basically that brings that number down to about 4 million,
Yes.
or, excuse me, 3 million.
Three, yeah.
and I think that's part of the discussion, Paul, is that when we talk about other areas that we would like to see ARPA funds used in, it may be that we want to designate less for broadband. And so, I mean, that we can tentatively, because we have done that, we can set aside that 5 million, but that's not cast in stone. And
I wholeheartedly agree. I'm just wondering if we have what we need to make that decision today. I'm not sure we do.
I
we'll
don't,
never.
But
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I don't think we're ever gonna know what the final number is for broadband, because I just don't think that that's a fixed number that we can decide, because it's kind of, it's a, it's a moving target out there. As the more he works, the more he determines, what else is needed for funding and so on. So I don't know. Deep down inside, I say to myself, I don't think we can meet everybody's need. And at some point, we're going to have to decide how much of ARPA we want to devote to broadband and how much we want to devote to other worthy projects. And I'm going to tell you right now that I'm shying away from the spending half of our ARPA funds for one project, and that's broadband. So, but I'm not prepared today to talk about other areas, but I think that's a discussion that when we can all be together that we need to have and try to nail down some tentative areas that we want to devote ARPA funds to.
well, I just want to make sure we don't lose a little bit of sight about where a lot of the energy started off with, how we were going to use the funds. I mean, I agree, like, I don't think in the end we're going to spend $5 million on it. You might spend $3.5 million, you
On
might spend $4 million on it.
broadband.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on broadband.
I agree.
But I mean, keep in mind, I mean, like today, you're not here because of COVID. This whole thing got started because, you know, like kids need to be able to take classes. I just want to make sure we don't get too like caught up in, yeah, towns drag their feet. They don't want to, it's sometimes, some of this is bigger than a lot of these small towns can deal with. And that's why like the county hiring somebody and kind of, I'll be honest, taking over some of that from some of the smaller municipalities and little towns that they don't know broadband from the hole in their head. It's what we should be doing because they can't handle it. They don't have the resources, they don't have the interest, they don't have the desire, but you still have families out there that their kids can't go to class because they don't have any broadband there. So that's why all this money's getting thrown at it. I don't want us to throw at it in a wasteful way, of course. I want us to be careful. I think we have been. So I want us to just watch out about like being a little bit like, hey, you haven't gotten back to us, so sorry about your luck. Well, yeah, sorry, hate to tell you, some of the town select people don't care, but there's still a bunch of families that can't get their kids to be in school. And just because this pandemic seems to be tailing off to the very end, doesn't mean next week we don't hear about something. We're right back where we were, so I just want to watch out about.
Well, so you're making a case for, you know, sitting
I'm
tight.
sitting tight a little bit on it
Yeah.
and realizing that I think Commissioner Clark's right, that we're not probably gonna spend $5 million on this. That's totally, I think, reasonable. Think that, and we can start making some other, we can change our earmark to a certain degree. I don't think that necessarily hurts a little bit if, you know, we ended up saying, you know what, at least where we stand right now, maybe it's $3.5 million that we're willing to set aside, at least for now, or $4 million to set aside for now. Whatever, I mean, we can have that discussion. I just want us to keep in mind, like, you know, there's kind of a bigger picture here that we've been given responsibility for. I don't want us to lose track because you got a lot of small towns that want to deal with it. They can't handle the logistics of it anyway, so that's for us to kind of help out with.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's proposing action to reduce that. I think we're in agreement that it sounds like we need to sit tight for a little bit. Am I mischaracterizing that, Commissioner Clark?
Well, at this time, no. But I'm curious, gentlemen, in the back of your mind, do you have other areas that you're thinking about that, and I'm not asking what they are, I'm just saying, are you guys prepared to sit down and say, okay, we haven't talked about this area or that area, or whatever, but what about spending ARPA funds for these, in these areas? And I'm wondering if perhaps the three of us individually on our own couldn't draft our thoughts into something and give it to Michael, let him organize this next discussion we're going to have as to what this funding plan, the appropriation plan is going to be for the full 10.6 million.
To me, certain things came to mind, and there were in the legislation, actually. One was housing. I haven't figured out, you know, one of the problems with that is how can you do it effectively? You know, because that's an area where you could spend a lot of money and not have a lot of impact, but it is in there and it's something that's on my mind. The other thing is, you know, sort of this opioid crisis that we're in, and, you know, are there, you've touched on it in the past, you know, with corrections, you know, is there a way to have an effect there? I mean, that is a major crisis in our county, and, you know, can we have an effect? You know, maybe the answer is no, but certainly something I'd like to look at, you know. it's certainly something that, probably our sheriff and our jail administrator would, could weigh in on it. But those are two areas that I think are worthy of looking at. John, I don't know if you.
I mean, I agree, both of those aspects, and I think we also realize, after 2 years of this, that there's gonna be projects that come up here, just at our normal county government that we're gonna be like, yeah, we should use that for, we like have a later discussion that's got brought up about lighting at the jail, but to me,
Yeah.
that's like an obvious thing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
That it should get used for that. It's a
Yeah.
project that we would have done because it's a maintenance thing so that matches up and it helps out in general. So to me, that's like an obvious thing. And I think those kind of things are just gonna kind of keep rolling here. While funds are around it, it'll help offset, make some of our budgetary things easier.
That and sort of make some improvements that are in line with the spirit of.
Yeah. Definitely.
Bill, is that what and Michael, is that sort of what you had in mind? I mean, it's tough to sit here today and say, throw numbers at those things, but,
So I think from the stats perspective myself, obviously, just speaking for myself, but I think what I'm looking for is just to make sure that you have the information and the tools that you need so that when we get to that decision, when you're gonna make that final decision, that you have what you need to be able to have that discussion and have it be a meaningful discussion. And certainly, we don't want to cut it short. I mean, I think it sounds like obviously, and that's why I asked John what the answer to that question was, that perhaps maybe in a couple of months when he has that information, that is another time, whether you set up a workshop or something to hammer this out and then come back and take formal action on it at a subsequent meeting, but at least from our standpoint, to make sure that we're not just treading water over the next couple of months, that if there's areas that you want us to try to get your information, come up with perspectives on and present that to you. The big concern obviously is we're not waiting until the very end and then trying to throw everything at the dartboard to get it to stick. If we can plan on stuff and have that be able to be ready to be kind of actionable, so at least you know what it is that you're gonna be trying to do once you agree to an overall category, then that just makes us farther ahead, because, I mean, obviously, 2024, the end of that's gonna come up pretty quick when we have to have it committed to something. And 2 years later, some of these projects, it'll take that long to maybe get them done to get that money
Funded,
expended.
yeah.
So I think we just wanna make sure that we're being able to support you where you wanna go with this, and that there's a plan to make a plan, I guess, at this point.
well, one thing that might help us get there is, and Commissioner Clark touched on it, is, broadband. Let's take broadband, because that's something we have made a commitment to. That can't go on forever, because that's going to keep us from addressing some of these other things that we've talked about and stated that we have interest in. So, maybe the answer is that we do set a goal of having broadband discussion and the total committed to broadband settled in 3 to 6 months. And that would enable us to start touching some of these other things. And in the meantime, there are things that are gonna crop up. What John mentioned with the lighting is spot on. So
I think definitely by late summer, Bill, I totally agree. I think we could set a pretty firm line what we're saying broadband is gonna be. And I don't think that's dragging our feet too slow on it. I think that's giving it enough time so that we can make a little bit better decision.
yeah, in my mind, hearing John's points today, he threw out 2 months. I think that by July 1,
Yeah.
we have a number that's, on broadband. I'm not talking to the last penny, but I'm talking to the,
Yeah. and a reevaluation of
Yeah,
where we're at.
yeah. Bill, does that sound?
Well, we've said this several times, but we're not creating something as rigid as an annual county budget. That once you establish the revenue amount, once you establish your expenditure amount, it's voted on, fixed. So if, no matter what that number turns out to be a year from now for broadband, it doesn't mean that if we didn't fund as much as it took, we can't decrease another line, another projected use, put it towards that and reduce that. So I mean, when we get the number for broadband,
Don't stop moving. I hope not for real. Yeah. Okay, so are we, Michael, do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have enough for today.
Yeah.
I know there was some discussion and so we wanted to make sure you had a clearer picture from where you were at the last meeting so that John was gonna present today. So at least we could start fresh and kind of know where you wanted to go. And even if that's a few months off, the only thing I would say is obviously by the end of 24, you kind of gotta know. I mean, at that point, we've gotta have projects into the portal telling the feds this is what we're doing with it. So,
Yeah, we don't we have to.
yeah, so I mean, that's definitely where that endpoint is, so.
I think Bill's suggestion that we can kind of work a little bit on our own, like what we see as the major
Yeah.
things, and then when we do have a workshop on this that might happen sometime this summer, that we'll have an idea, like, well, my thought was $1 million on this, or whatever, we can kind of, then we can work on it.
Okay, sounds like we're ready to move on. Everybody's
There's a motion on the floor.
Okay.
John made a motion for the
Yeah.
allocation report.
to accept and file a report, yeah.
And Bill accepted, Bill seconded.
Bill seconded, is Bill back? Yes, Bill is back.
Bill's got it.
So, Bill, what we're gonna vote on was the original motion to accept and file a report. Is that fair characterization of the
I think
motion?
we filed, we voted on both of those.
No,
We
not
did
the
the
second.
second one.
Not
We
the
did our
second.
discussion on the allocation spending.
Yeah.
But we voted on the second one without voting the first one.
No, we voted on the first one, but not the second one. So we're ready to vote?
I'm sorry, we vote. I thought we voted on that because I was concerned that we were voting on it before we discussed it, but nevertheless, it doesn't make any difference.
No, we was moved and seconded, and this was the discussion. Yeah, so, we're ready to vote? All in favor? Aye,
Aye.
so unanimous.
And I can tell you, Paul, that after losing my connection 3 times this morning, and whatnot, I changed my mind. I want to spend all 10 million on getting a decent.
You're underserved. To your address, yeah. Okay, Mr. Granger, sorry, we had you as 2A, and we thought we could sneak an item in before you got here, and we were mistaken, so.
Thank you.
So we have your memo, where you presented a case for taking action of some sort. Sounds like we have some questions. I don't know, some of them were asked of you by our administrator. I don't know if you want to touch on those, or if you want to take questions.
You have copies. Did you have the second page of the transfer proposal?
Yeah, I gave you the one this morning that was scored over. So
If you have one there, I'd love it. That way I'm updated. Thank you.
Second page.
So, I'll let you start, and then we'll ask questions. How's that?
Well, I received this yesterday. I was in Portland, Calais. And so I have not been able to do any legwork since receiving it. I had Annalise over in our office do some research. It appears that some of the questions are answered by the second page of the proposal, which is a straight lease or the option to purchase. Of course, I'm walking into this year with a budget that's already been set for me. We're down to one photocopy machine. And it's essential that we have two, one's upstairs, one's downstairs. The downstairs one is consumed by intake, reproduction of all police reports, discovery, restitution matters. The one upstairs is used by all the district attorneys, the file organizer, and the office manager. I believe the downstairs one, for instance, is registering 217,000 copies since we received it, I think, 2 years ago. I'm not sure when the purchase date was. So that gives you some sense of the volume. If we lose the photocopy machine that we do have functioning right now with service last week, it was starting to break down. We would be left without a copier, we would be shut down. We can't produce discovery, which is required by statute. We have 2 trial terms coming up. We can't make exhibits for trials, so we're stuck. And this is all new to me, being new in the position. I don't know what was calculated for the budget for repairs, but this is the only information that I have available right now. And I don't have an office manager to undertake any further research right now.
So my feeling is that this is right for ARPA funding. This caseload is created by courts being shut down for an extended period of time. You've made the case, this needs to somehow, we need to find a solution to this.
That's why, like, purchase outright and find out about a maintenance lease or whatever maintenance program, like, pricing of that.
Yes, and moving forward, what we do, that's why I favor purchasing outright and with a maintenance plan. Because if you take the lease pay, I know that that's not present value, but the lease payments of 152 over 60 months is over $9,000. So my guess is that's present value that the return on that lease is probably 10-12%. So I'm for buying this item outright with ARPA funding. But moving forward, I think that we need to set a CIP account up somewhere where, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of let's call it 7,000. 7,000, the 60 months, an expected life. I would assume that with that kind of usage, you're not going to get much more than that.
I would think that would be, I think the machine that's going to be replaced is 10 years.
I think 60 months is probably the typical, we have,
Yeah.
of course, we have multiple machines throughout the
Yeah,
whole county. So I think the 60-month lease is probably the typical,
life of it.
and this falls into, that's why they were looking at the leasing, because it just falls into the contract with the rest of the,
Okay, so
the unexpected part is that it's an additional lease from the DA's office.
yeah, so to me, we buy this out of ARPA funds. In your budget, you've got to have about $120 a month or times 12, about $1,400 a year devoted to this CIP or this reserve, so that 60 months, you have money to buy another one.
Which essentially, there is money in there, but we'll have to,
Adjust.
so there is a reserve account right now, but we'll have to obviously make that adjustment based on whatever actions taken today, so in next year's budget.
Okay, so for me, the question is, we have a purchase policy. Where does this fit? To me, we need to move forward with this. We need to move forward with it consistent with our purchase policy. And in my opinion, it needs to come out of ARPA funding.
So I think the issue, I think at this point would be whether or not you could make it fall under that emergency category, which I think Dave Granger just made his argument for
Strong argument
why
for
that
it.
would be the case. So I
Yeah.
think that really is obviously up to the commission to decide, but that would be the case. And obviously this reflects nothing on him because he just got here.
No,
He's
we gotta
working
solve
on
this
it,
problem.
But going forward, it seems like in hindsight, and that's easy for me as well, because I just got here too, to say, you know, it shouldn't have probably gone this long. So that probably should have been replaced by the county much sooner. And I think that's what you're aiming at with this
See, I think-
plan, is making sure so that we work with the DA's office to make sure that going forward with their budget next year, they've addressed that. So,
Yeah. And the piece that I don't know is, I know in technology for the DA's office, there's some state money comes in. Is that correct, Chuck?
Do not know that for the state.
Well, last time I went through purchasing computers, there was state involvement in that. Is that?
Well, for the DA,
For the
the
DA's
DA, yeah, it's the state law.
But obviously that doesn't apply here. Is that fair?
I mean, that was one of the questions I asked, but I'm not aware of any. But
I'm not aware of any, I think some of the state assistance, some of the computer purchases, I think there's some requirements for the security. I think that was dovetailed into these
Okay,
computers.
so that really doesn't address this. Okay, and then your office is sort of a shared county office? Is that correct?
It's nothing I've seen before.
Yeah,
Is it-
nor I.
The upstairs is state and the downstairs is county for the most part. Well, we've got two county employees upstairs. But,
So there's no cost sharing here?
no,
Okay,
and I can't cost share with Washington County because Washington County has its own issues with its copy machines.
okay, so they have an office and we have an office.
Yes, well, I've got two offices, one in Callis, one in Machias. That one here.
Okay, so that, so that sort of negates, okay, so I guess the question to pose to Michael is that how do we make this consistent with our purchasing policy? And I think Mr. Granger's made a good ARPA funding case.
so, I mean, I think your question, I think is presumably been answered by his presentation, the information. The only thing that we don't know, I guess, is what that ongoing maintenance cost is gonna be.
Well, we don't know, but what we can surmise is that it's gonna be similar to what I'm sure he's paying maintenance on what he has now.
Yeah, but we just paid, that was part of the issue. We just paid an invoice in February that covered, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Monica, but covered the year for 2023. So that was another question I had is, do you get any credit for that since we're turning that machine or junking that machine? So, you know, that's why I'm saying I can't tell you right now what that may look like. It may be that maybe they get credit for that, or it may be that we need to start raising a monthly amount. So he may have to come in with a larger transfer than the $550 or so, or $520 he had, but $550 to make up for that $30 difference.
But what we could safely presume today is that that's a wash, because it's not gonna increase so substantially that it can be covered with a transfer out of his budget,
Maintenance costs.
the maintenance cost.
That's right.
Okay, so,
It'll just, that's right.
okay, so I guess the question is, can we make, Transco is not a sole source provider of, I know we do business with them, but we need to stay consistent with our purchasing policy. And where does this fit into our purchasing policy?
Seems to say, Michael saying that it fits, you can do it because it's an emergency, right? Is that what you're-
Yeah, I mean, I think that was what you were looking at. Let me, pull this back out again.
I'm just trying to put my ducks in a row so we can make a decision. I don't mean to belabor this.
I am seeing. I'm learning to.
So are we.
I just want to say one thing Michael said was that they're going to be replacing one of the machines, but that was the machine that had only used a very minimal number of copies, Mike. So the 1,500 that we already paid was on the machine that they're keeping. So there probably will not be any credit for the turn-in on
okay.
the machine.
So that's the one we're keeping.
The one we're keeping is the one that's being used.
But that was the last, it was serviced last week.
Yeah, and the one that they're getting rid of is apparently not being used because it's in poor
It's
condition.
unplugged because it was burning.
Yeah,
Okay, but were we paying maintenance of any sort on it?
very little.
Okay,
Yeah.
It's per copy,
Okay.
okay.
and they had 6 copies estimated used on that.
Well, usually there's a minimum, but anyways, is it safe to, I guess my question is this, can we take action to purchase this out of ARPA funds and be consistent with our purchasing policy and have the maintenance that's gotta be paid on this new copier covered under his budget, because that can't come out of it. Well, actually, it could if it were paid.
I think the
Upfront.
maintenance on the new copier will fall under the 2024 budget. And we can cover it at that time. This year is already taken care of.
Okay. So are we,
My thing is, can we do a vote on this? Because this price isn't really, is this, that municipal pricing, is that really what we pay right now if we outright buy it?
That's the,
Well,
Same.
what it says.
you would hope so, but again, we can't say that 100%. Because we don't have a
Leave the
written.
motion open.
well, what we could do is make a motion to purchase it from Transco under the emergency provision with an amount not to exceed 6329. Would that accomplish what we need to accomplish, and would it be consistent with our purchasing policy?
So that's the part that I'm checking right now, like the first part, most likely, yes, would be able, hopefully, but
And funded on ARPA.
He's checking his purchasing policy, but I would raise the roof a little on the municipal pricing in case the contract comes through a little higher, but this looks like a good number from Creighton, that if we decide to purchase it outright, the municipal pricing has been listed at 6,300.
Yeah.
So unless there are anything Creighton hasn't told us, it looks like that's the price, but, so you could bring it up, say 7,000,
Not
no
to
more
exceed
than 7,000. And then we can check the hard pricing.
Bill, do you have anything to add?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I think there's a strong argument to be made that Transco is sole source. We have some other issues around the county and whatnot where you can't mix and match service providers. A good example is that we have 6 consoles down in the RCC. Each one of those are a separate independent console. You can't be buying one from GE and getting a service tech out of Brewer, and another one from Motorola and getting a tech out of Ellsworth. And then you have to decide which one breaks down on who you're going to call. And I think that's the situation we have with Transco and the copiers throughout the courthouse, is that we need to have one source to go to every time we have a copier issue. And right now that's Transco. And so I just think that we need to remember that in the future, and if you can embrace that we consider Transco sole source and continue until we decide that somebody else is going to take over all of the copiers. Second of all, I'm fine with paying lump sum from ARPA. And I can tell you, knowing Creighton, that if he's quoted 62, he'll sell it for 62, and don't let him charge you a dime more, because he can afford not to.
yeah, so I mean, if you're willing to consider that as a sole source, based upon the fact that they do, I mean,
Yeah.
that's what they provide. Now, are there other providers? I know that there's another department right now that's looking at copiers that has been trying to get somebody to actually start, another company to actually submit her a proposal. And if she'd actually have it on the agenda today, but it's taken her a long time to be able to get that second price. So if the commissioners feel comfortable that because of the arrangement, all the agreements that we have with Transco, the equipment, the maintenance and everything else, then obviously that's your answer there too.
Okay, so, John, is somebody prepared to make a motion? something to the effect that, authorized purchase of, DA copier, as an emergency purchase, sole source, up to, whatever the dollar amount is.
All right, so I move that we purchase a new Xerox copier from Transco as a sole source provider for no more than $7,000 to be purchased out of ARPA.
How about an emergency purchase?
All right. As an emergency purchase and sole source provider for no more than 7,000 to
Not
be
to
purchased out
exceed,
of ARPA.
yeah, not to exceed 7,000. Okay, is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion? Ready to vote? Michael, you're satisfied? All in favor? Aye.
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 So unanimous. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much for.
Realize the predicament you're in and
Well, hopefully in the next budget, we can
address
address
some of
some of
those
those
issues.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're ready to move on to the UT. We have two regional animal control agreements before us. First of all, one from Stonington. I don't know if we don't have the UT director on, but Michael, I don't know if you have anything to add or,
It's my understanding this is like the other one.
yep,
Again,
identical.
I'll just note, again, the same issue still exists, that we know the position was advertised in the paper, and I still haven't heard anything from anybody, so, yeah.
Going forward.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to move to approve the regional animal control agreement between the town of Stonington and the county of Hancock as presented.
Second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Unanimous.
All right, I'm going to move to approve the regional animal control agreement between the town of Sorrento and the county of Hancock as presented.
Second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, unanimous. Next up is the RCC. I don't know if you want to introduce or just dive into this. First up is the resignation for full-time dispatcher Bryn Jellison, effective February 10th.
I'm going to move to accept the resignation of full-time dispatcher Brian Jellison effective February 10th, 2023.
Second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion, anything to add? All in favor? Aye.
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 So unanimous.
All right, I'm going to move to approve that the RCC advertise for a full-time dispatcher.
Second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion, anything to add? All in favor? Aye.
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 So
Where's that leave you with your?
Right now, I'm down two, down the daytime QA position, and I'm down one evening shift dispatcher, which I'm covering a lot of those shifts right now. When I've been talking a little bit about the daytime position, here soon we'll be presenting an idea. At this point, I'm down at least two dispatchers.
So it's not getting better.
I'm working on it.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Okay, airport. First up is a request for a change order for the stormwater drainage repair. Leroy, I don't know if you want to have anything to add?
I don't have anything to add to that. This is the change order that got us to finally get the ditch closed in, and our share is at $3,200, $32.20, I believe, and a couple of cents will be our 5% on this. We had discussed a few months ago.
All right, I'm going to move to approve the change order number 1 to AIP -3-23-0006-057-2022 stormwater drainage repair. Phase 2 contractor Gordon Contracting, Inc. in the amount of $64,367.50, and the airport manager to sign.
Is there a
Second
second?
the motion, second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Call everybody's consent. All in
Excuse me,
favor?
Paul, just like, I had one question. I noticed, is this the first time that we've had airport managers signing these contracts as opposed to the chair?
No,
That's happened.
yes.
Leroy, that's appropriate here?
It does say on the change order airport, so.
Yep, okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm ready to vote.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Unanimous. Next is the request to change phone bill and 3-year contract for the airport.
What do you got on this one?
So this was a deal, I got looking at the phone bills and basically in the internet that we have here, like these meetings are a little sporadic for me. That's kind of why I don't have the video on. To get us a little more bandwidth here, and when I looked into it, we can actually save about $200 a year if we switch. It's a consolidated, quite frankly, it's the same person that Brad dealt with a few years ago that surprisingly was still there that I talked to. So they're reducing the copper phone line price, and that reduces the overall bill, and we can get 100 meg of service. So we go from 40 meg to 100 meg, and we save money in the end.
So this isn't really just a phone, it's not really just a phone contract, this is your data, your internet.
Yeah, this is the phone and data, yeah.
Now it makes a lot more sense, because I was looking at this thing and I'm like, okay, well, why am I worried about your DOS mitigation problems with your phone lines? I mean, like, are we having, so I don't understand why we're wanting to do this, so.
Any other questions?
So you've got our options here though, right? You want option 1? Is that what you said?
Option 1, that was the 3-year term with and I talked to Chuck and Banyan, and they both suggested the DDoS security service that Consolidated has recommended. We don't really have much for security on any of our equipment here, so hopefully that'll bring us into a little bit more secure.
I'm just curious, so like you've got a 3-year and a 5-year option, so like, is there a reason why you?
Yeah, well, the 5-year option was actually more expensive. And there was a lot of changes to do the 5-year option. The 3-year option is basically, it's the same as we have. All they're going to do is really speed up the internet and decrease the cost of the phones.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, I went through the plan with him and agreed the 3-year was the best option.
Good. All right, I'm gonna make a motion. Do you have anything to discuss, Bill?
No.
I just want to make sure. My motion is to approve the proposed services option 1 at the Hancock County, Hancock County Bar Harbor Airport between Hancock County and Consolidated Communications for a term of 3 years as presented.
Second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion or questions? Ready to vote? All in favor? Aye.
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 So unanimous. Thank you, Leroy.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Next is the sheriff, permission to sell used equipment to Sullivan Fire Department along with the already approved sale of the used cruiser. This is sort of this is the equipment of the cruiser that we approved at last meeting.
Do you have any?
Have they already bought the car?
We approved it. I don't know if it was.
But I haven't, you haven't seen, no, we haven't seen any money for it.
No,
And have
Michelle
signed.
did take the title, though. She did ask me to pull the title for that one, and she came up and got that title.
Okay, so.
I assume, yes.
All right, I'm gonna move to sell for $1,000 to the Sullivan Fire Department the equipment that is already in the cruiser they are buying.
Is there a second? I'll second the motion.
So the only thing I think you may want to preface to that is that it doesn't include because presumably by now, the equipment that the county wanted that they took out, but that doesn't include any equipment that was in it that the county has already removed or arranged to be removed from the vehicle. So it's just the remaining stuff in the cruiser after the county has.
The second is all right with that amendment if you want. So the motion now reads to sell the,
To sell for $1,000 to the Sullivan Fire Department the remaining equipment
It's remaining.
that is already in the cruiser.
okay, move, that's okay with the second. So that's what's on the floor. Any further discussion?
Well, I'm gonna make the same pitch I made last time. These small departments, fire departments struggling enough, to get staff and to fund new equipment and everything. And if we have an opportunity to get rid of some equipment that we have no use for, and the sheriff is never really going to be able to sell this because nobody else there's no market for this. And I think this is a good opportunity to do Sullivan Fire Department a service and to give this to them. And I think after paying $5,000 and ending up with some equipment that we don't need, that they could use, I think it's a good way. And I'm gonna oppose charging them anything.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is sell for $1,000. We ready to vote on that?
My only point, not that I don't agree with
All right,
Bill's saying, but the only thing is, maybe the sheriff has a plan.
Yeah.
Maybe like wants $1,000 in his budget to do something else.
Yeah.
I don't want to like
cut that.
undercut him.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like this deal is struck.
Kind of struck.
Yeah. So moved and second, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm opposed.
So motion carries 2-1.
Or
Next up is, and Monica, you have both. You have who voted
Is there
where?
a jail item?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Next up is jail request approval for corrections officer Autumn Moore to take leave without pay due to a family situation out of state from April 6th through the 20th. Is there anybody here that needs to address that, or are we?
all right, I'm gonna move to approve the leave without pay of corrections officer Autumn Moore from April 6th to April 20th, 2023.
Second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
So unanimous. Treasurer, I'll let you introduce this, Monica, as opposed to reading all that.
Well, the discussion regarding the interest rate and the subsequent vote did not take place at the meeting on February 7th when we presented the recapitulation letter. So this is just doing the homework of bringing the rate up to the state standard of 8% instead of 4% for any towns that don't pay their taxes after October 31st.
And that 8% covers, that's a statement.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm gonna move to set the interest rate at 8% for legal taxes for the taxable year of 2023.
Second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion or anything to add, Michael and Monica? We're all set. All those in favor? Aye.
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 unanimous. Commissioners, discussion of proposed rules of order and meetings and agenda policy. Michael, I don't know if you.
So based upon the discussion that occurred at the last meeting, I just made a couple additional changes, softened the language, the timetables and stuff like that. And we've obviously started to put that into practice, as you can see with the item from the DA that was requested. So that's today's kind of a test trial of kind of what that might look like going forward. So I also gave it to staff, department heads anyway, not the entire staff, but the department heads to look at. And the only comments I received back that I put in my agenda memo was that a suggestion about including the remote agenda, kind of the access policy component that you already have adopted anyway. So there was something that does cover that separate from this, but including that into it, and also mentioning or a reference to workshops if the commission wanted to do that. But those were the only two feedbacks. Most of the other feedback that I received was read it, no problems, okay, no problem. So those were the only two items that were mentioned.
And to me, those are items that make sense being in here, so they're not two different places. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly makes sense. Obviously, I didn't include it, not knowing where you want to go, so that's the question. I can go back and make additional edits, or it's however you want to approve today. You can approve it with the addition of those two, or I can make those changes and come back the next meeting.
Okay, with that said, to me, those changes should be made. How we proceed is, however commission wants to, but the other question is, what do we do with the current agenda policy? Do we scrap that? Do we scrap the, to me, I like everything parked in one place, but I don't know how the rest of the commission feels. Bill, I don't know if that's a hand or.
No, if we adopt these new rules, I think we should get rid of the old ones.
Okay,
Yeah,
so what's the commission's pleasure? Would you like the administrator to come back with a revisions and suggested action for the next meeting? Or do we want to take action on this today?
Well, Michael, is there anything else left to change than your proposal today?
I don't believe so. I mean, I think at this point, if the commissioners were happy, all of you were happy with what it looked like, then I think it's ready to be approved, although I am obviously agreeable to those two additional, things being added in here as well. So I can see the argument for it, but I don't know if it necessarily needs to hold things up today, or it's really just your preference. If you want them in there, then I can put them in and come back at the next meeting, but as far as I know, everything else, unless you tell me otherwise right now, is kind of set, so.
Well, my only thought is, at the next meeting, with these revisions, you could come back to us with a final document. Basically a repeal and replace agenda item that would be very straightforward, and to me, there's no fire.
Is there such a thing? Is there such a thing, Michael? Is the proposed document we have now, you're gonna change that?
So that was the suggestion that was made by Chairperson Parity, is that basically add in those two references, one to the remote meetings and then also workshops. And then coming back next week to our next meeting, to finalize this policy. So you wouldn't really be able to, adopt this today unless you don't care that those things aren't included. And if you don't want those included, then you can just adopt it as presented. But if you want them included, then you could adopt it today, but then in 2 weeks I'd have to come back again anyway. So otherwise it would be basically tabling it until the next meeting to give me time to put that language in there and then have you approve it with the language.
And
As he's stating as additional item, or maybe to get combined, but an agenda item that also makes it clear that you're repealing the other item, the agenda existing policy.
I just like the idea of adopting a complete agreement. So to me, the two courses of action are approve this document, go with it, Or do we want those additions? The only reason I like the additions is because they're somewhere else now. Especially the remote meeting policy, that could be in here, and that way we have one document.
So just table it.
Yeah, so is that,
Yeah, I
Is
mean,
that
if you want those in, I think that's probably the best route to go, is to table it till the next meeting, and I'll make those changes. And obviously, we'll have it as one agenda item to adopt and to repeal.
should be very straightforward. And is there a downside to including those two items for you?
I mean, not necessarily, it does make it easier for everybody, again, like you said, to just be able to consult one source rather than go back. I don't think, because of the nature of what needs to be included in the remote policy, I don't think you're gonna be able to summarize that in here, so I think you obviously wouldn't be repealing that policy,
Okay,
but you could make reference to here to the major components of it, which is it's allowed under these criteria. Otherwise, I think you probably would be extending the content of this particular rules of order beyond what you really want to do. So I wouldn't, I mean, repeal the existing meeting and agenda policy, yes, but I wouldn't suggest that you try to repeal the existing remote, just that you include that provision in here so it references what happens or that's allowed as part of the rules of agenda.
yeah, my only reason for wanting to, or suggesting tabling is just make it easier on you. I think all of us are on the same
Okay.
page here.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I have no problem. I mean, like I said, we're basically
Doing this.
moving in this direction now anyway, so.
Okay, so we'll agree to, that this is coming back
At the next meeting, yeah.
Yeah.
With those changes.
with those changes. Is that okay with you, Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
You're okay?
Yep.
Okay,
All right, I'm gonna move to adjourn.
Second the motion?
any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 And thank you. Hope you feel better.
And